Hello everybody, my name is Omega Zero and welcome back to another reading of Maternal Instinct. This time we're reading chapter 2. And I'd like to thank the author, Blackbird, for clarifying the Canadian cobbler reference from the previous chapter. It was actually a parody of American Pie, and I would have never guessed that. So thank you, Blackbird, for clearing that up for me. And I pre-read this chapter ahead of time so I don't fumble over myself this time like I did last time. So hopefully this time will be a lot smoother. There'll be less mistakes. And just sit back and enjoy. Okay? And disclaimer, the author or nor myself do not own Kim Possible and any Kim Possible characters are owned by Disney, Mark McCorkle, and Bob Shuley. Any original characters shown or mentioned belong to the author, Blackbird, and cannot be used without permission. Chapter 2. Why, I've been a baby. Darkness. That was all she knew at the moment. The darkness that surrounded her. It wasn't a bad kind of darkness. In fact, it was quite peaceful. The kind one would find in a dreamless sleep. It was comforting, and held a promise that it would keep away all the bad things in life. It was a feeling the great teen hero Kim Possible rarely got, so she planned on enjoying as long as she could. Unfortunately, that only ended up being about 30 seconds. Kim! Kim! She heard someone calling. The voice sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't quite place it at the moment. All she knew was that it was trying to pull her away from her peaceful, non-dreaming sleep, and that she couldn't have that. She fought off the annoying voice for as long as she could, but it persisted, drawing her ever closer to consciousness. She let out a soft groan as she slowly became aware of her surroundings. The first thing she noticed was the hard, cold floor she was lying on, probably concrete from the feel of it. The second was a soft breezing being blown in her right ear. Finally, she acknowledged the voice that was still calling her name. She cracked open an eye, but could only make out a mass of black, peach, and yellow hovering over her. She blinked a few times before she reopened her eyes, and they finally focused on Ron looking down at her in concern. She could make out a pink blur from the corner of her eye, fanning her with something white, and assumed it was Rufus using a handkerchief. Ron? She asked, uncertain. It's me, KP. You okay? I just had the most horrible nightmare. Did it have anything to do with Shego saying that you were her baby's daddy? Kim's face scrunched up in confusion at the remark. How did you know that? She asked a bit hesitantly. Because it's actually happening, a second, much too familiar voice added. Kim tilted her head towards the source of the voice and found Shego standing over her as well. She smirked down at the fallen hero for a second before a thoughtful look crossed her face, and she tapped a finger against her chin. Although, I would definitely say this counts as a nightmare, she remarked. Definitely, Kim agreed as she pulled herself to her feet. She dusted herself off before she looked towards Shego again. So, the pale woman answered back. I told you, you know, so now I'm out of here. With that, she turned and started to leave the dark warehouse, leaving a very stunned Ron and especially Kim behind. That was her plan, at least, until Kim vaulted over and landed right in front of her, blocking her path. Where do you think you're going? Kim asked indignantly. I don't know, away from here. To where? I don't know. Have you even thought about what you're going to do to raise this child? Kim tried to reason with her. Unfortunately, this only succeeded in putting a nasty thought in her head. Panic and fear gripped her as she gripped Shigo's shoulders, a bit more tightly than the villainess would have liked. You are going to have this child, right? She practically pleaded. Calm down, princess. I already went through that. And yes, I am having the baby, Shigo reassured her. Kim lowered her head as she let out a sigh of relief. As she thought about the statement, however, an anger suddenly flared up inside her. It was an anger that she never felt before and couldn't quite explain where it came from. Part of her knew it was irrational, but she couldn't fight it. As it washed over her, she gripped Shego's shoulders tighter, surprising them both. She slowly lifted her head again to give the woman a glare that seemed to cut right into her soul. "You did what?" Kim growled in an eerily soft voice. Shego stammered, taken aback by the sudden change. "You tried to kill my baby?" "No," the other woman shouted as she brought her hands up and swatted away the arms holding her. "I'm trying to tell you I didn't do that, and I'm the one actually having the kid. It's still a part of me. It's part of me too." Acting on instincts honed from her previous encounters, the two rivals took defensive stances and stared coldly into the other's eyes. Shego ignited the plasma around both her hands, forgetting about her condition for the moment and focusing only on the one thing that seemed to make sense right now: beating Kim possible. For her part, Kim was trying to keep herself calm, but the idea of what Shego had suggested she tried still made her blood boil. Over the time they had known each other, the pale woman had seemed bent on taking everything from her, and now almost took her legacy. There was no way Kim was going to let her get away with that. Excuse me, ladies," Ron spoke up, hoping to break off the fight before it started. "Need I remind you that you only came here to talk, and that one of you really shouldn't be fighting right now?" They turned their heads towards him and stared at him blankly. He waved at them nervously and gave an awkward smiling, hoping at least Kim would come to her senses and keep from hurting herself, or Shego, or most importantly, him. Fortunately, it seemed his luck held out this time, as Kim finally sighed after too long a silence and relaxed her pose. "He's right," she said in a soft, apologetic tone. "We can't fight with you like that." "Yeah, I guess not," Shego agreed, sounding slightly disappointed as she deactivated her powers. "There we go. Now maybe we can go back to talking about this very sick and wrong subject in a civilized manner," Ron advised as he stepped forward and placed a hand on each of their shoulders. They glared at him again, and he quickly withdrew, holding his hands out in front of him in an "it's cool" gesture. He was about to say something else when Rufus scampered up to his shoulder and held the blonde's lips shut with his little paw. "Shh," the naked mole rat inclined. His master chose wisely to listen to him and merely stepped back to let the two women continue their conversation. With him out of the picture, they once again looked at each other, but this time with a much gentler gaze. In fact, it seemed to Kim that Shego was looking guilty about something. She was about to ask another question, but was cut off before she could open her mouth. "Look," Shego started, "I did think of having an abortion. I'm not gonna lie to you." "First time for everything," Kim muttered as she folded her arms over her chest. Shego gave her a dirty look before continuing. "But I decided I couldn't go through with it." The redhead let out another relieved sigh and lowered her arms. "Not that I'm complaining, but what stopped you?" she asked. "Believe it or not, Princess, you did." "I did?" "Yeah. I kept hearing your annoying voice nagging at me as I stared at the clinic." Kim went back to being annoyed. "Gee, thanks." "Welcome," Shego smirked. Her expression went back to melancholy as she continued. "Plus, I figured you had the right to know. Like you said, this baby is a part of you too, and..." "And? What and?" For the first time in a long time, Shego found herself afraid and unable to face her opponent. She turned away from the teenage hero and she placed her hands protectively over her stomach. "You met my brothers," she said over her shoulder. "You know what happened to us. That meteor changed our lives in a lot of ways. The obvious, of course, being our powers, and, well," waved a hand across her face, "but it changed us on the inside too. Everything still works the same, but our genes kinda got skewed, let's say. Because of this, didn't think I'd actually be able to have kids. So then this happened." "You were amazed and thought it might be your only chance to bear a child?" Kim offered. The raven-haired woman chuckled at the reply. "You know, it always did amaze me that you could do that. It's a gift." Silence filled the warehouse. Silence filled the warehouse, tried to figure out their next move, while Ron and Rufus continued to watch from the sidelines. Now that the details of the situation were out in the open, all that was left was to figure out how to deal with them. For Shego, it meant trying to think of what exactly she was going to do. She decided that she was going to have the baby, but she really didn't know the first thing about childbearing. With all that had happened in the past, there was no way she could turn to her family. Not that she really wanted to. Technically, she could raise a child on her own, as she had enough money saved up from her villainous career to support herself and a baby for quite some time. Plus, it wasn't like single-parent homes were rare in this day and age. Still, the thought of raising the child by herself scared her. She hadn't felt truly scared like this since the meteor changed her. After that, she figured she could handle anything life threw at her. Of course, she never expected anything like this to happen, but she could handle it. She knew she could. She just needed to take a moment and think of a plan. Before she could get too far into said plan, her train of thought was broken when she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Kim standing closer to her and giving her a soft, reassuring smile. It was something she thought she would never see directed towards her from the redhead, and it was a little unsettling. It was strangely comforting too, and much to her surprise, Shego found herself relaxing because of it. "Look," Kim started, speaking softly, "I know you probably want to try to handle this yourself, and I don't doubt that you could, but the baby's part of me too. Let me help you in raising it, or at the very least, seeing it born." Shego was going to try and offer a rebuttal, a reason why she didn't want or need the teen hero's help, but nothing came. Instead, she simply sighed and closed her eyes while she dipped her head. "Alright," she agreed. The smile that Kim's lips suddenly curled up into threatened to split her face in half. She didn't know why the announcement made her so happy, and at the moment, she didn't really care. "That's great!" she said enthusiastically. She then reached out and grabbed Shego's wrist. "Come on, I know just where we need to go." "Huh, what?" Shego stammered when she suddenly found herself being dragged along behind the redhead. "Ron, let's go," Kim ordered as she passed him. The sidekick in question simply watched in a daze as former girlfriend walked out of the warehouse, dragging her former rival behind her like a straggling pet. Ron looked towards his own pet still standing on his shoulder, and the two shrugged at each other in confusion. He didn't know where Kim wanted to take them, but he was sure that all this craziness was just getting started. Middleton was by no means a big city, nor was it a small town, merely a town. Despite its relative smallness, Kim knew it was still a good drive from the warehouse where Shego had requested to meet her and new destination. Middleton General Hospital. The two buildings were on the opposite sides of the town, so she knew she had to hurry if she wanted to get there in time. Of course, being that it was almost 7:30 on a Friday night, she knew she was pushing her luck and thinking that the person she wanted to see was even still there. But it was the only thing she could really think to do at the moment, so she hoped he was there. While Kim focused on who they were going to see, Shego was more focused on where they were going. Even before she got her powers, she never liked going to the hospital, and afterwards it was one of very things she would admit to being afraid of. It seemed like all doctors ever wanted to do was poke and prod her, which made her feel like a rat trapped in a cage. So when Kimmy finally let it slip as to where they were going, her first instinct was to throw the car door open and roll out to freedom. That idea was squashed, however, when she remembered her current condition. So she settled for simply slumping back with her legs crossed and arms folded as she glared daggers into the back of the girl's head, hoping to convince her to take her somewhere, anywhere else. Unfortunately, that tactic didn't seem to be working. With a sigh, she resigned herself to the fact that she was going to a hospital whether she liked it or not. She glanced out the window to try to focus on something else, but Middleton offered very little in the way of eye-catching sights. It was certainly a far cry from the tower buildings and neon lights of Go City, How someone like Kim could stand to live here, she would never know. Speaking of whom, she turned her gaze back to the world-saving cheerleader driving the car. So far, she had been unusually quiet during the trip, which wasn't too surprising given the bombshell she had just dropped on her. She was probably trying to figure it all out just like Shego was. Still, there was something else about it there sat uneasy for the pale-skinned woman. She had caught Kim looking at her through the rearview mirror a few times, but never looking over at her goofy sidekick in the front passenger seat. Not that she blamed her. He was hardly an impressive physical specimen. There was just a vibe between the two she had picked up on since their meeting in the warehouse. She had an idea of what it was, but needed a way to confirm it. Shrugging, she decided just to go for the direct route. "So, you two are an item now, right?" she asked. Their reactions told her everything she needed to know. They both stiffened at the question and started to fidget about nervously. A slight grin spread across Shigo's face as thoughts of how to have fun with this information entered her mind. "The fairy tale ending didn't go quite like you thought, eh?" she prodded smudgingly. "So what was the problem? Stoppable no good at the nighttime activities?" At this, the car screeched to a sudden halt. Thankfully, it happened to coincide with the light in front of them changing red. Once the car settled from its rapid stop, Kim poked her head around the driver's seat and gave Shego a cold, hard stare that would paralyze just about anyone else. "We are not having this conversation," she snarled. "Yeah," Ron agreed, imitating the look quite well. Shego had bit her lip to keep from laughing out loud at their reactions. It amused her when she could get under Kim's skin in any way that definitely seemed to do the job. It amused her when she could get under Kim's skin in any way, and that definitely seemed to do the job. She thought about pursuing the joke further, but figured it was best to leave it alone for now. "So, Shego," Kim looked at her through the rearview mirror as she spoke. "Since you're so eager to talk all of a sudden, mind telling us what you did with Draken?" "I took care of him," Shego answered offhandedly. "Took care of him how?" "Well, I didn't kill him, if that's what you're asking. I just made sure he got the message that it wasn't okay to do things like this." "So where is he now?" Ron asked. "Tucked away somewhere nice and safe," Shego replied, with the devious grin covering her face again. The warden of Fox River Penitentiary had seen a lot over his many years of service. Beatings, stabbings, even elaborate escape plans were all old hat to him, but what the captain of the guard had called to tell him took him even by surprise. He arrived as quickly as he could from his house and was currently being led to the cell in question, where the captain stood and stared at the person in the small barred room. "What's this all about, Belloc?" "Strangest damn thing I've seen, even for this place," the captain replied as he gestured to the person. The warden looked into the cell and found a man huddled up in the fetal position on the lower bunk, sucking on his right thumb like a child. Two things immediately caught the older man's attention. One was the prisoner's blue skin, and two was the abject look of fear in his eyes. Even with all his years of experience, it still took him a moment to process this information. "What happened?" he asked, turning back to Belloc. "Don't know," the younger man replied. "Found him dumped outside looking like he had been beaten to hell and back. When we asked him what happened, he just demanded we lock him up." "Why?" "He said to keep himself safe." The warden gave him a confused look, then went back to studying the blue-skinned man in the cell. "You already put him in uniform?" "Had to," Belloc replied. "The clothes he had on were torn to shreds. So, what should we do with him?" I guess we'll keep him here overnight, then call someone in the morning to get this all straightened out." Belloc nodded in acceptance and thanked the warden for coming in so late before he and one of the other guards escorted him out. The captain lingered a moment to glare disgustingly at the curled up figure in the cell. Just what he needed, another wacko to look after. By the way, I apologize for giving Bellic an Irish accent. It just seemed natural to me, that's all. By the time the possible family car pulled into the parking lot of the hospital, it was slightly after 8 o'clock, and the regular entrance had been closed for the night. Fortunately, being the daughter of one of the top brain surgeons, there afforded Kim entry into the building. She and her impromptu entourage walked through the halls in search of her doctor's office. She just hoped she wouldn't run into the one doctor she didn't want to see right now. "Oh, Kimmy," her mother's voice called to her. Of course, Kim thought as she slumped her shoulders. She tried to appear her usual chipper self as she turned to face her mother, but from the look on the older possible's face, she could tell it wasn't working. Kim braced herself for the inevitable "what's the matter?" question, but was surprised when the question ended up being, "Kimmy, isn't that..." Once Kim actually registered the question, she caught her mom's gaze, and even without the glance over her shoulder, could tell she was looking at the newest member of her group. "Yes, it is," and Kim answered, "and I'll explain why later. Right now, I was hoping to see if Dr. Anderson was still here." "Well," Mrs. Possible replied, placing a finger on her chin thoughtfully, "I think he said something about having to stay late to finish up some paperwork." "Great! Can you go get him and have him meet us outside the sonogram room?" Mrs. Possible's eyes grew wide in surprise just before she gave her daughter a questioning look. Again, there was a promise to explain later, which the girl would definitely be held to, before Kim, Ron, and Shego walked off to find the sonogram room. Mrs. Possible shook her head before she went to find her colleague, hoping that he would be able to get the answers she couldn't at the moment. Dr. Anderson sighed as he looked down at his watch. He was already put in 3 hours worth of overtime, and judging by the small amount of papers he still had to fill out, he wasn't leaving anytime soon. Paperwork was one of the worst parts about being a doctor. Not the worst part, certainly, but it was far up there. Briefly, he considered finishing up the paperwork he was currently working on and finishing the rest in the morning, but somehow that prospect seemed even worse. What he really needed at the moment was a break from it all. Anything would do, just as long as it got him out of his office and away from the evil papers. His salvation came in the form of a gentle knock on his door. "Come in," he said, sounding more eager than he meant to. As he watched the door open, he slightly hoped that he hadn't inadvertently agreed to more paperwork, but those fears were put to rest when the smiling face of Dr. Possible peeked into the room. "Rich, do you have a minute?" she asked. "For you and anything, especially if it gets me away from all this paperwork," he replied, leaning back in his chair and placing his hands behind his head. "So, what's up?" "Well," Mrs. Possible replied, stepping into the room fully, honestly, I really don't know what it is. Kim just came in and asked if you were available." "Anything for one of my favorite patients. So, where is she?" "That's what concerns me. She wants to meet you in the sonogram room." At that, he leaned forward in his chair until his elbows touched his desk, and he gave her a confused look. "Is there something I should know?" he asked. "You and me both," she muttered in reply. He continued to give her an odd look for a few seconds longer before he tilted his head some and raised his eyebrows in a gesture of acceptance. He then stood up and grabbed his doctor's coat from where it hung on a stand behind him. "Well then," he said as he slipped on his coat, "let's go and find out together." Anne nodded in agreement as he walked around the desk and pushed the door open. Ever the gentleman, he let her exit first, following closely behind her. Their usual small talk was gone as they walked through the hallways, the implication of Kim's request weighing heavily on both of them, but obviously much more on Dr. Possible. If what she suspected was true, then it would not only change her daughter's life, but also the life of the entire Possible family. When they arrived at the sonogram room, they found the three had already gone in and made themselves comfortable. The number of people threw Dr. Anderson off at first. He knew that Kim was going to be there, of course. and had seen her best friend turn boyfriend back to best friend a few times before. But the pale-skinned woman in the black and green catsuit had been a complete surprise. Judging by the way she was glaring at him, he could tell that she really didn't want to be there, and that she really didn't like doctors. Also, the fact that she was the one sitting on the medical bed gave him a distinct impression that she was the one in need of a sonogram. Still, he wanted to make sure. "So," he said cheerfully, "who here thinks they're having a baby?" "Oh, we don't think, we know. And it's her," Kim replied, pointing to Shego. "Thank God," Mrs. Possible sighed, causing her daughter to give her a confused look. "I thought for a moment you had done something foolish." "Mom, give me a little more credit than that," she screamed, her cheeks turning red. "I know, honey, but you have to admit, it's all a little strange. I know you want to help people, but why someone who's tried to kill you before?" "It's part of that long story I need to explain later, which you can deal with on your own time. Right now, I have a patient I need to tend to," Dr. Anderson said as he walked over to Shego. Being stubborn as ever, Shego inched away from him, causing the thin sheet of wax paper on the bed to crinkle under her movements. Dr. Anderson stopped mid-step and considered her for a second. Her actions seemed to confirm his earlier guess about her not liking doctors. Adjusting quickly to the situation, he stayed the relatively short distance between them and stared intently at her stomach. Even this action seemed to make her feel a bit uncomfortable as she took her folded arms from underneath her breasts to cover over them. The more he looked at her, though, the more agitated she seemed to get, as emphasized by the bouncing right leg crossed over her left. "Get a good enough look at, Doc?" she snarled. "Honestly, no," he replied calmly. "I'm trying to see how far along you are, and judging by how little that suit leaves to the imagination, I'm guessing not much. Wanna help me out?" She stayed silent for a moment. "A month. Good, now we're getting somewhere. So, do you know who the father is?" Even as he asked the question, his head was subconsciously turning to look at Ron. This caused the other eyes in the room to be directed towards him as well, but he stayed oblivious to it for a few seconds longer. When it finally did hit as to why they were looking at him, he let out a slight panicked yelp and threw his hands up defensively. No, he said, backing away from them. "Please, don't insult me," Shego retorted. "Alright, so if it's not him, then who is it?" Dr. Anderson asked. "Yeah, see, that's kind of the complicated part," Kim spoke up. "It's Kim," Shego said offhandedly, jerking her thumb towards the redhead. Silence encompassed the room. The confusion and uneasiness surrounding the group seemed to drown out the noise from the rest of the hospital and place the sonogram room in its own private bubble. Kim's cheeks flared red once more, and she fidgeted around nervously as she could feel her mother's shocked and questioning gaze burn right through her. She turned around slowly and tried to look as innocent as she could, but she knew it wasn't working. The stern look on her mother's face demanded an answer. Right now, she just wasn't sure she could come up with one. Fortunately, she was saved when the scratchy, rumbling sound of plastic wheels being moved across a tile floor filled the room. Everyone watched as Dr. Anderson pulled the small chair up to the bed near where Shego was perched, then sat hunched over with his elbows on the armrests and his fingers tented in front of him, giving her an expecting look. "Go on," he prodded. The pale woman squirmed a bit before she looked over to Kim for help. The plan backfired, however, when the redhead sent her the exact same look while she discreetly gestured to her mom with her hand. Shego let out a hefty sigh before she looked at the doctor and again recounted the tale of Dragon's greatest scheme ever, and how she wound up in her current state. Dr. Anderson took a moment to digest the information, then leaned back in his chair and rested his head on his left hand, his index finger prodding his lips in thought. "Well," he spoke up after a moment, "it's definitely a unique situation, I'll give you that." "And so much fun, too," Shego replied sardonically. "But can we just get on with this whole thing so I can go?" "Shego," Kim admonished. "What?" "No, she's right," Dr. Anderson said, standing up. After hearing that, I really want to get this show on the road. So then, he looked Shego up and down again. How does the suit come off? Usually the guy has to buy me a couple drinks first, she remarked. Well, you're going to have to expose your stomach so I can do this right, and since that thing looks pretty one piece... Again, Shego sighed. It zips down the front, but, yes? Like you said, it doesn't leave much to the imagination, and so... She looked over at the other people in the room, specifically Kim. Doesn't really leave room for anything underneath. Ah, alright. Looks like we're going to have to clear the room. Never took you much for the modest type, Shego, Kim said. There's a lot about me you don't know, princess, Shego countered. So I'm learning. This is fun and all, but I need to be alone with my patient, so if you please, Dr. Anderson said, making shooing motions with his hands. The sound of squeaking shoes then filled the room as they slowly filed out. Kim cast one last glance at Shego before she closed the door behind her. It was only after hearing that securing click that the raven-haired woman undid her belt and set it aside before unbuttoning the collar to her suit, then slowly sliding down the well-hidden zipper. She laid down on the small, rather uncomfortable bed before she pulled the two halves of her costume back, sliding the tight material enough to expose her stomach, and offer only a tantalizing view of the rest of her body. Sorry, Doc, but this is all you're getting, she said. All I need, really, Dr. Anderson replied, placing sonogram gel on her exposed stomach. Shego gave a slight shudder when the cold, slimy gel first touched her skin, but quickly recovered and forced herself to calm down. At least she tried to stay calm, but seeing a doctor approach her with a strange-looking device caused a few bad memories to resurface, and her body to tense when he placed it on her stomach. She closed her eyes and repeated to herself mentally that that was all he was going to do, and that it would all be over soon enough. She just had to be strong. Luckily, being strong was one of the things she did best. Huh. Just like I thought. The doctor's voice caught her ear. What? What's like you thought? She asked, opening her eyes and lifting her head. It's a baby, he said matter-of-factly. Shego groaned and laid her head back down. Great, a doctor who thinks he's funny, she thought. Anyway, he spoke up again. From what I can see here, everything looks normal enough. But this early on, it's kind of hard to tell. Plus, given the fact just how this baby was conceived and your albinism, well, we're definitely going to have to run some tests later on. Ooh boy, I just love tests. Ooh boy, just what I love. Tests, she muttered. She then noticed the other thing he said. Wait, what was that about my skin? Well, albinism is a generic trait that can be passed on. Of course, since the, well, let's say father has normal skin pigmentation, there's a 50-50 chance the baby will have it. Ah, and what if the albinism isn't really normal? Well, albinism itself isn't normal, but what are you talking about? Shego let out a small, irritable groan at the fact that she was going to have to retell yet another facet of her life with this complete stranger. She relented, though, and told him about the multicolored meteor that crashed through the treehouse she and her brothers used to play in, and gave them all a unique power. Power then used to help the citizens of Go City as the superhero group Team Go. She ended her tale with her departure from the team, leaving her activities from then on a little ambiguous, though, from her explanation of how she became pregnant. She assumed he could take a guess at them. Whether he did or not, she couldn't tell because he kept the same neutral expression on his face throughout her story. If it did change, it seemed more out of concern for her than shock or suspicion. So, what kind of power did you get? He asked. In her response, she held up her left hand and ignited her green plasma energy around it. Ah, well, that is interesting. I take it you can control it then? He ventured. Yeah, Shego said, extinguishing the flame to emphasize the point. Okay, Doc, I gotta admit, this is creeping me out a little how well you're taking this. I've seen a lot of weird things in my time. Partly the reason for this, he explained as he ran a hand through his short, prematurely gray hair. But this isn't about my problem, it's about yours. Aside from the obvious, what else is a problem? She asked with a dangerous edge to her voice. Well, I really don't know what kind of effect these powers of yours are going to have on the baby. I'm definitely going to need a sample of your blood now, as well as close examination of the baby later on. Say about 2 months? That might give me a better idea of what we're dealing with here. And what if I decide not to go through with this? Well, 3 things will happen. 1, a problem with your baby that we could easily fix could go unchecked. 2, Kim will most likely bring it back here, kicking and screaming anyway. And 3, I could call the police right now and tell them I have the person who stole the patient's files right here. Shego gasped in surprise of the obvious threat. She really couldn't tell what she was more surprised at though. The fact that he knew who she was this whole time, or the threat itself. While the police chasing her was nothing new, running from them while pregnant was. Not to mention the fact that Kim was waiting right outside the door and would no doubt chase her down the second she thought something was wrong. Even if she did manage to escape, it would put her right back where she started. Confused, alone, and with the baby on the way. So trying to run would just be stupid. She may be many things, but she was not stupid. How do Thursdays work for you? She asked in a snide yet sheepish tone. Just fine. So I'll see you this coming Thursday for the primary blood work, and then 2 months later for another look at the baby, Dr. Anderson replied, nodding in satisfaction. With the situation resolved, he handed her a towel to clean off the sonogram gel, which she did vigorously. She cleaned up as much of the sticky gel as she could, then dropped the towel on the floor and zipped up her catsuit. She shuddered at the feeling of the remnants being pressed against her suit and her skin, but it ignored it and fastened the top button, followed quickly by the belt. She hopped off the table, stepped briskly over to the door, and after flinging it open, nearly trampled Kim and Ron as she marched into the hallway. I'm done, let's go, she said curtly. But what? Kim tried to ask, only to be cut off. I said let's go! Kim gave her a confused look, but shrugged it off and turned towards her mother. I guess I'll be going home now. Do you need a ride home? She asked the older possible. No, I'm fine. Your father said he'd come pick me up after work, her mother replied. Alright, Kim agreed before she gave her a small hug. Could you, try to get him softened up for this? I mean, don't just tell him because I think I should do that, but get him ready, I guess. I'll see what I can do, Kimmy, but I'm not sure about all this myself. Neither am I. Kim gave her mother another quick hug before turning and leaving with her group. Shego actually seemed to lead the charge, and possible to watch her daughter disappear into the sea of people still in the hospital and let out a large sigh. She really wasn't sure how to explain the situation to her husband, or even what was going to happen from here on in. She knew that Kim would attack it head on like she did with everything, but she didn't think her daughter was ready to be a mother just yet. For that matter, she wasn't ready to be a grandmother just yet. Never a dull moment for your family, is there? Dr. Anderson mused, breaking her thoughts. They are few and far between, she said distantly. Kim's hands tightened around the wheel as she turned the corner into her neighborhood. As she drew closer to her destination, she began to rethink her plan, such as it was. The feeling only intensified when she looked at the person in the seat next to her. After she had dropped off Ron, Shego insisted that she sit in front so she could more easily talk to the world-saving cheerleader about what they were going to do about their upcoming child. At least, that's what she assumed Shego was up to, but she hadn't said a word since she repositioned herself. This left Kim to carry out the only thing she could think. Take Shego home with her. An idea she was beginning to regret. Unfortunately, it was much too late to think of anything else, because before she knew it, she was pulling into the driveway of the family home. She turned off the engine absent-mindedly, and simply stared into space for a moment. Well, here we are, she finally said, still sounding a bit distant. And where's here? Shego asked, looking up at the decently sized home. My house? Your house? This is your house? The pale woman cried out, leaning forward to look at the house again. Yeah, what about it? Kim asked, feeling suddenly feeling self-conscious. I don't know, I guess I was expecting something more Brady Bunch, small wrench style thing. This is actually pretty big. Well, mom's a brain surgeon and dad's a rocket scientist, so we have a pretty good income. I bet. It's not like I'm spoiled or anything. Didn't say you were. Kim let out a low, irritated growl before finally unbuckling her seatbelt and practically throwing the door open. Come on, let's go. Go where? Shego asked, stepping out as well. Inside, of course. Shego was about to offer protest when Kim suddenly moved around the car and grabbed her by the wrist and yanked her towards the house. She was about to ignite her free right hand and strike, but remembering what the doctor told her, she stopped herself and merely thought about punching the annoying redhead. That idea was halted as well, and instead she simply snatched her arm away from the girl. When Kim gave her a questioning look, she gave her an irritated glare in return. Kim sighed before she made a polite motion to the older woman to follow her, which surprisingly she did. When they entered the house, Shego was taken aback when Kim crouched down and began searching the house as she would for traps in one of Draken's bases. In fact, everything about her body language, from her crouched position, her shifting eyes, and tense muscles, seemed to suggest that she was expecting trouble. This caused Shego to tense up as well, and subconsciously stick close to the younger woman as she bolted from the front door up a set of stairs. She acted more on instinct than anything else, and followed Kim's gaze up and down the small hallway, looking for any signs of trouble. Though exactly what kind of trouble she didn't know. She just knew that when the all clear signal was given, she followed the girl up another flight of stairs. This one leading into a modestly sized, very pink room. It was this sight that caused her to snap out of her sneaking mode and return to her previous state of confusion and irritation. Good, I don't think they saw us, Kim whispered as she cast a glance down the stairs. Who? Shego demanded, placing her hands on her hips. My geeky little brothers, she explained, calming down a bit. The last thing I need right now is them seeing you and telling my dad you're here before I do. Uh-huh, and why exactly am I here? Because it's part of my plan. And that plan is to beg my parents if you can stay here, Kim explained sheepishly. Stay here? Shego replied, looking around the room. Well, not here. This is my room. I just meant in the house. At least as long as the pregnancy lasts. Yeah, don't think that's such a good idea. And why not? Me and the whole family thing? Yeah, never really worked out for me. I mean, you've met my brothers. This will be different. My brothers aren't quite as annoying as yours, and my parents are pretty good at adjusting to weird things. Plus, it will help us both out. You'll have a place to stay while going through the pregnancy, and I'll be able to help out as much as I can. Come on, please? Once again, any protest she could muster was interrupted by Kim's actions. This time, however, instead of grabbing her or speaking over her, the girl's lower lip began to quiver while her eyes seemed to grow larger and saucer-shaped. Her hands clasped together at her side as she continued to stare at her former evil sidekick, her large eyes giving off a sad and pleading look. What is that? Shego asked, caught completely off guard. Stop that! Whatever that is, it's not going to work, so just stop. What isn't going to work? Kim asked in a sappy, sweet tone. That look, whatever you call it, won't work, so stop it. Right now. I'm serious. But the look didn't stop. If anything, it basically seemed to grow intensely, causing the raven-haired woman to squirm about uncomfortably. She closed her eyes and looked away, but she could feel it, still boring right into her very soul. She braved cracking open an eye after a few seconds, only to find the look still directly on her. With a cry of frustration, she finally gave in. Fine, I'll stay. Just stop doing that. Instantly, Kim's expression changed from pleading to victorious. Shego answered with one of annoyance as she placed her hands on her hips. Alright, what was that? What? Kim asked back. That look. What was that? Oh, that's just my puppy dog pal. I use it when I really need to, persuade people. Shego blinked. Wow, you're a lot more devious than I gave you credit for, princess. Hey, don't turn it into something bad. It's just helpful. Right. Just drop it, alright? Kim asked with a sigh. And stay up here while I go downstairs and wait for my dad. I need to prepare him before I actually have you meet him. Though I have no idea what I'm going to say. I will just explain what happened. And when I say I mean you. I've explained it enough for one night, thank you. Fine, I guess that's fair. Just try to be quiet until I come get you, okay? She requested. After getting a confirming nod from Shego, she started to walk back downstairs, only to stop when a particularly nasty thought occurred to her. She did a half turn so she could glare back up at the older woman. And don't go through any of my stuff, she demanded. Yeah, like I've got nothing better to do than to go through your frilly crap, Shego retorted. Kim narrowed her eyes in suspicion, but didn't press the issue any further and continued on her way. Shego watched her out of the corner of her eye as she slowly faded from view. She craned her neck to peek past the stairs, and then, when she could find no sign of the redhead, gave a devious smile spread across her face. She had promised not to go through Kim's frilly stuff, but that didn't mean the rest wasn't fair game. A quick glance around the room told her the first place to start looking was the computer at the far end. Smart little girl like Kimmy must have some kind of virtual diary I can scan through, she thought as she made her way over to the desk. She stopped when she was about halfway there. Of course, she probably had that computer nerd of hers put a ton of firewalls and security codes. Not that I couldn't crack them, it just seems like too much work right now. And I suppose I should be somewhat nice to her since she's helping me, so no going through a locked stuff. That doesn't mean I still can't look at what's lying around. Her new goal in mind, Shego pulled the computer chair over to another part of the desk, which held on it a black spinning CD tower. She sat down in the chair and began leafing through the titles, a task she soon came to regret. Oh boys, Britina, Side Alley Guys, LMNT, she muttered, her face twisted in disgust. I thought she'd have better taste than that. She turned the tower to another side and found a pleasant surprise. MC Honey. Well, that's a good start at least. Still, no way I'm letting my baby listen to the rest of this crap. I can kinda guess what Side Alley Guys is, but the rest, I have no idea. As Kim descended the second set of stairs in the possible household, she racked her brain for something she could tell her father about her current sedge. It wasn't so much what to tell him as it was how to tell him. He had always been a little overprotective when it came to her and dating, so she was afraid telling him she was about to have a baby might drive him over the edge. Of course, the fact that she was the father might help soften the blow, but still, it was going to be hard for even her family to adjust to. Right as her foot touched the carpeted floor, the two people in the world she least wanted to see right now appeared in front of her. Her annoying, younger twin brothers Jim and Tim. By the matching devilish grins on their faces, she could already tell they were up to no good. Something she was definitely not in the mood for right now. So, Kim, Jim started up, sounding much too sweet. What? She snapped. We heard you sneaking someone into the house, Tim finished. Was it Ron? Jim asked. Are you two making up? More like making out. With that, they both began exaggerated kisses noises. Kim growled as she balled her hands into fists and let out all the night's confusion and frustration out in one loud roar as she drove towards her brothers. Years of annoying their sister prepared them for such a reaction, and a split second before she pounced, they were already running into the living room. She quickly recovered and chased after them faster than they, or even herself, had anticipated, and she caught them right before they left the room. She held them up by the back of their shirts until they were eye level with her. Listen carefully, dweebs, she said in a soft growl. You two are going to forget you heard anything, and you are definitely not going to tell Mom and Dad. Especially Dad. Got it? Having never seen their sister this mad at one of their pranks caused them to go silent in shock, and they slowly nodded in agreement. Good, she said, and dropped them both. Once they recovered from the sudden fall, they looked up at her once more before running out of the room in fear of their lives. Kim waited until they were out of her view before she let out a large sigh and fell down onto the couch. She leaned forward to rest her elbows on her knees as she rested her head on her hands, rubbing her temples to try and calm herself. It did little good to fend off the headache she felt coming on, but at least it was doing something, and that's all she wanted right now. The peace was short-lived, however, when the sound of the front door being opened caught her attention. She turned to prop her right arm on the back of the couch to watch her parents enter the house. Any greeting she had to offer was cut off by her father's angered rambling. "The nerve to tell me that my records are inadequate for need," Dr. Possible muttered as he stepped into the living room. "Hi, Dad. Rough day?" Kim offered. "Very," he sighed as he fell down into his usual chair. "There's a new head scientist in the AI department, and he's just so..." The sentence devolved into a series of growls and angered choking noises. Kim looked to her mother to see if she could provide any answers, but the look her mother gave her told her she already heard the story too much. Knowing that she couldn't break her news to her father like this, she drudged on in hopes of calming him down. "What happened to Dr. Freeman?" she ventured. He went to a private company when they offered him more money," Dr. Possible explained. "That's odd. He didn't seem like the kind that would chase money." "Normally, no, but this company was willing to put up with his eccentricities." "Ah," Kim nodded understanding. "So this new guy is not working out, then?" "Well, yes and no. Dr. McCoy is actually a genius in his field. The problem is he knows it and wants everyone else to know it as well. Even poor Vivian, who's supposed to be his partner on the project." "Oh, that can't be good." "Not at all. She's already defensive about people not taking her seriously because of her looks, and now she has to deal with someone who cuts down her actual scientific work." He sighed again and shook his head. "It's just frustrating for all of us." Kim nodded silently as she leaned back against the couch. Her father seemed a little more calm now, but she still wasn't quite sure it was time to break the big news. At the very least, she had to think of a very delicate way to tell him so as not to set him off again. "So, your mother said you had something to tell me?" he said, throwing her completely off guard. Yeah. Well, you see, the thing is," she stammered. "Mom! Dad!" Jim and Tim shouted as they ran into the room through the kitchen. "Kim snuck someone up into her room!" That was definitely not a delicate way to break the news. Kim glared at her brothers in pure, unfiltered rage and wanted nothing more than to jump over the couch and make them pay for the little outburst. Any thought of revenge was halted, however, when her dad's own intense stare cut through the fog of anger. It forced her not only to come to her senses, but also to shrink back into the couch in uncertainty. "Kimmy, is this true?" he asked in a measured voice. "Well, yes, but it's not what you think," she defended herself. "And what is it I think?" "James," Mrs. Dr. Possible spoke up, placing a calming hand on her husband's shoulder, "I think this has something to do with what she wanted to tell us." "You knew about this?" he cried indignantly. "I know some of it. Kim, why don't you go upstairs and bring down your friend?" she suggested, looking at her daughter. Kim silently thanked her mother and then bolted up the stairs. She slowed her pace when she came to the stairs that led to her room, not quite sure what to expect from Shego. Thinking about it now, it seemed like a huge mistake to leave the woman who was as much of her arch-rival as Draken was alone in her bedroom, but she didn't have much of a choice. "Shego?" she called, stepping more fully into the room. "Over here," the other woman replied. Kim looked in the direction the voice had come from and found Shego crouched down in front of a small display that held some of her most cherished possessions. "You collect cuddle buddies?" Shego asked in disbelief as she quirked an eyebrow. "Yeah, what's so wrong with that?" Kim asked, folding her arms over her chest. "Nothing at all. 5 years ago. And what's with the music?" She pointed behind her to the tower. "What's wrong with my music? The Lion King soundtrack? I like it," Kim shot back. "And it's not like any of this is really important right now." "Maybe not," Shego agreed as she stood up. But I just love to annoy you. You're doing a great job at it, she muttered as she turned back to the stairs. Now come on, I'm going to try and explain all this to my dad. Ooh boy, meeting the parents. Kim shot her another annoyed look, to which Shego merely held up her hands to indicate she would stop. Satisfied, the younger woman led her down the 2 flights of stairs and into the possible living room, where her bewildered father waited. He watched carefully as they stepped in front of his chair and stood there before him as they were peasants asking a medieval lord for some favor. At least, that was the impression Kim gave off with how jittery she was. Shego, on the other hand, seemed rather disinterested in the whole thing as she stood with her hands on her hips and looking off to the side. Dr. Possible didn't speak for a few seconds longer as he tried to place where he had seen this unusual woman before. Kim, isn't that... he asked, perfectly mimicking his wife's tone earlier in the evening. Yes, this is Dr. Draken's former sidekick, Kim explained, gesturing towards the woman. Former assistant, Shego corrected. Right. Anyway, she's here because she's pregnant. With my child. Much like his words echoed his wife's statement earlier, so too did his actions, and his eyes widened, and a look of complete shock overcame Dr. Possible. He looked back and forth between his daughter, his teenage daughter, and the older woman at her side. Even his usually brilliant mind, which had no trouble plotting launch vectors and mixing complex chemicals, couldn't process this simple bit of information. It just seemed impossible, a word he rarely ever used. How? He managed to spit out. Draken devised a retrovirus from her DNA that was supposed to infect me and make me pregnant, but after a slight mishap and a cut to my arm, Shego ended up the one with the baby instead, Kim explained as succinctly as possible. And this isn't some kind of joke? Pfft, only on me, maybe, Shego scoffed. Kim tried to ignore her. No, it isn't a joke. It's actually happening. It is, Mrs. Dr. Possible added. I was there tonight in the hospital when they went to see Rich, and he confirmed it. All right, Dr. Possible said, slowly taking it all in. So, what exactly are you going to do now? Well, I was kind of hoping that maybe, possibly, Shego could stay here, Kim suggested. At least until the baby is born. Yeah, then I'm out of here. And I want to point out that this wasn't my idea to begin with, Shego said. The 2 older Possibles looked at each other in concern. I don't know. Come on, please, Kim pleaded. Her lower lip started to quiver. Don't try that puppy dog pile with me, young lady, he said sternly. This is a very big decision. Are you sure you're going to be able to handle it? Of course, I can do anything, remember? That's what you say, but having a child is a big responsibility, Mrs. Possible spoke up. Might I remind everyone that I'm the one actually having the baby? Shego asked rhetorically. Which means I'm the one that's going to have to put up with all the weird cravings and mood swings and, of course, the labor pains which sound oh so fun. Wait until you actually experience them, Mrs. Possible muttered. I think what your mother is trying to say, Dr. Possible spoke again, drawing their attention, is that you need to be ready for what raising a child is going to be like, both of you. At that thought, they both began to squirm uncomfortably. Shego shifted her weight from one foot to the other as she twirled her thumbs behind her back. Kim kept her gaze moving throughout the room, looking at the ceiling, the floor, the furniture, and anything else that prevented her from looking at her parents. She couldn't look at them now because she knew they were right. She had spent the last few hours convincing Shego to let her help her with the baby and never took a moment to think of just how she would help, or even if she could. She just knew that she had to help somehow. You're right, she said softly after a moment. We really haven't thought of what it was going to be like to raise this child. When did I ever say that? Shego asked offensively. Well, have you? She made a small scoffing sound, but said nothing else. That's what I thought, Kim remarked and looked back at her parents. So, what better way to learn to than in a house with a wise, loyal, and caring family? The Possible parents looked towards each other again. They knew their daughter was laying it on a bit thick, but they also knew she was right. Well, alright, but don't let this distract you too much from your schoolwork, Dr. Possible told Kim, then towards Shego. And you, as long as you'll be living under my roof, you'll be following my rules. First and foremost, no fighting. Like I'll be in any condition to fight here in a few months, Shego muttered. Come on, I'll show you to the guest room, Mrs. Possible spoke up, walking over to the pale woman. Surprisingly, Shego offered little resistance as the elder female Possible led her through the house. As she imagined, their house was decorated with multiple family pictures depicting the kids through various stages in their lives. Rather plain-looking furniture and a surprisingly dull kind of blue-gray wallpaper. She half expected the walls to be some kind of insanely bright color, like sunshine yellow or something similar. Overall, it wasn't a bad house, but it had a sense of family comfort that made her feel uneasy. Maybe because it was such a big contrast to her own dysfunctional family. If she was really going to stay here, though, she needed to get used to the idea, though part of her felt queasy about the whole family bonding thing. She focused on the here and now when Mrs. Possible suddenly stopped in front of a doorway near the end of the hall. She pulled it open and flicked on the light, then allowed Shego to step in first. When she did so, she wasn't too surprised with what she saw. The room was a medium size and was decked out in the same color wallpaper as the rest of the house. There was a full-size bed in the middle of the room with a wicker basket at the foot, which she guessed would be used for knickknacks or something. A dark oak dresser stood against the wall on the right side of the bed, while on the left was a small bedstand with a single lamp on it. A few short feet across from the stand was the double-door closet, which for the moment she had no real use for. The only window in the room was tucked away in a small nook, which also held a computer desk and rolling chair. Overall, it was a nice room, but nothing really extraordinary, just average. "I hope you like it," Mrs. Possible spoke up. "It'll do. Have to get some stuff to put in here, though," Shego remarked, then let out a surprised yawn. "But that can wait until later. Right now I need some sleep. It's been a long day." "For all of us," the other woman agreed. "And you probably should get some sleep. With your condition." "My condition? You make it sound like I have a disease." "If you start to think of it like that, you might start to regret your decision. True, it's going to be hard for a while, but trust me when I say it's worth it in the end." She added a soft smile with the statement that Shego couldn't help but return. After Mrs. Possible excused herself, Shego closed the door and walked over to turn the bed lamp on. She then walked to turn the main light off, leaving her belt on the wicker basket as she did so. When she made her way back to the bed, she pulled back the red wine-colored sheets and sat down on the white comforter. She pulled off her gloves and set them on the table before slipping off her boots and leaving them dumped on the floor. She quickly unzipped her suit past her breast to make it more comfortable, then lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling with her arms folded behind her head. As she stared up at the unfamiliar ceiling, she replayed the day's events in her head. She had gone from being the assistant to a mad scientist, bent on taking over the world, to the pet project of her former arch-rival and her family. Well, maybe pet project wasn't the right word, but they were treating her like she was made of glass. And it just didn't sit right with her. Just because she was pregnant didn't mean she was an invalid. She could still be helpful, somehow. She sighed and placed a hand over her stomach. The Possibles were right about one thing. She did need to start thinking about how to raise this child. Kim seemed to be more than willing to help, but obviously she didn't have more of a clue of what to do than she did. She was determined to make it work, though. She wasn't sure how, but she would find a way. But that was for later. Now the only thing she wanted to do was sleep. She reached over, clicked off the light, then pulled the blanket over her, and laid her head down further into the soft down pillow. She closed her eyes, and she quickly fell into a peaceful slumber. Her last thought of was what tomorrow would bring. To be continued. And so we have chapter 2. Holy crap. In a way that took longer than the first chapter. I don't know, I guess. But, more importantly, there was a slight cameo appearance in this chapter that I wonder if you guys can pick up on. I have my own idea, and I'm kind of interested to see what the cameo appearance is. I have two theories. One could be a bit Trekky, the other a bit beastly. And I'll just let that sink in. I don't know if I'm right, but I'll find out in the next chapter. as the author stated that the author Blackbird stated that he would reveal it in the ending author's notes in chapter 3, which will be next time. So, again, thank you for listening to this, and of course you can read it yourself in the description below by clicking on the link in the description below. And I'll talk to you next time. Again, if you liked it, click on the thumbs up button. I can't talk right now because I'm all talked out. And I'll talk to you next time. Until then, take care now. Bye bye then. Oh my god, yes! Oh my god, yes! Yes!